We'll take a top 10 Thomas episode video. How original. With both best and worst in one video. Daring today, are we? Yeah, I know. This isn't really a topic that's original. It has been done to hell and back probably a million times by now. I would really like to throw my hat into the ring of this episode rankings. So to keep this ranking of episodes less stock standard and mundane, I'll be ranking the best and the worst episodes in one giant video. This took a very long time to make. We will start by covering the top 10 worst episodes, and then we'll switch to the top 10 best episodes. Disclaimer as always for these rankings, this is strictly only my opinion, in my opinion only. If you disagree with my episode choices, it is perfectly fine, and if you agree, also fine too. These are episodes that I personally find good and bad. And also for the sake of copyright, I will only be showing images from their respective episodes when I cover them. These images are just pulled from the wiki and screen caps I can find them, but I just don't want to risk showing footage and risk copyright strike, you know. I would like this video to stay up. Now then, without further ado, let's begin. Number 10 worst. Henry gets it wrong. This episode is just dumb, but in an annoyingly mild way. In this episode, a storm hits Sodor and the wishing tree is struck by lightning. Henry has to collect some tree specialists and bring them to the forest. But Henry thinks they're going to actually cut down a tree, and then he proceeds to block a line by taking other engines' trains to block the line. The very overdone three strikes formula plays out, and Henry realizes that the specialists were actually there to save the tree and not cut it down. Like, duh! He then immediately realizes his fuck up and does all the line blockage and brings the tree specialist to the tree, and the tree is saved, yada yada yada. This story is just slop, I feel. It doesn't really feel like there are any edits to this script after writing initially. Like it was written in one day like a Mad Libs or something. Even the paper this script was written on doesn't fall as flat as this story does. This isn't the worst episode this season, or the whole series really. And this thankfully is the best episode on this half of the list. And there is a lot more worse episodes than this. Overall, a pretty mid episode. Number 9 worst. Thomas's frosty friend. Oh god, where do I begin with this episode? This episode has probably the worst execution on this list. Because I actually like the idea of this. It could have been like the car short Mater and the Ghost Light. I say could have, but it isn't. Thomas just unknowingly gets a snowman balloon stuck to his buffers and actually thinks it's fully alive and following him. He stops at multiple points and sees the balloon swing around and then bounce around for some fucking reason and then go back. He then realizes this at the end and then brings it back to wherever he found it. The 3 strikes formula is here again, but this one has 5 strikes. 5! Like, it'd be one thing if it was just 3 strikes, but 5? Like, come on, this is just horrendous. You can tell they're trying to stretch this out to be more of an episode length. Feels like filler. How did anyone not think this was a stupid idea to put this many strikes in the episode script? I was originally going to keep this on the dishonorable mentions list, but the writing is just horrendous in this one. I just don't like this one, really. In seconds, it could have been a good episode. What a fumble of an episode. Number 8 worst. Chickens to school. This one is the embodiment of just mid. Thomas is sleepy or whatever, I can't remember that well, and is given a list of jobs to do despite this. He mixes them up as he is tired, and ends up fucking up the jobs and drops off a bunch of chickens at a school. This one is just dumb because, first of all, why did Thomas's crew do nothing to stop this? They're the ones that actually drive the engine, so they would have known what to do. Second of all, the jobs given to Thomas here would have made more sense if they were handled by road vehicles. What happened to Elizabeth, Birdie, and the others that were well established by this point? Did they like just die or something? But this whole concept is stupid when set in this universe. considering that these sentient vehicles are controlled almost fully by their crew, because they can't move on their own. Having the engine forget things while the crew are present there makes it all fall apart, because the crew can just remind them. And that just breaks the plot. This, on top of everything I listed earlier, is why I just find this episode very mid and overall stupid. Just a very stupid episode. Number 7 worst. Up, up, and away. We all know this episode sucks. It's literally your generic Miller-era Mad Lib script. I've actually seen a lot of people put this at number 1 worst, and I don't blame them. This episode just sucks. But this one in particular is just stupid on a whole nother level. Like, why is the balloon being transported while fully inflated on a wooden flatbed? Also, why is the clown guy Mr. Bubbles still at the docks every time they have to go back and get a new balloon? Also, why are 2 engines needed for a single flatbed? This is just horrendous. And why isn't the balloon just inflated at the party site? We all know why this one sucked. You can literally see it before your eyes. This one just sucks. Many consider this the worst episode of all. But, given that the last few years of Thomas have happened, I personally consider this one pretty tame compared to what follows in this list. It only gets worse from here for now. So buckle up, there is a lot worse. Number 6 worst. Henry's Happy Coal. Again, the same Miller-era Mad Libs. This one is worse since it actually breaks the continuity of Henry needing special coal. Something that was fixed like what, 13, 14 seasons ago? This isn't the first time continuity's been broken already, but like I had to rewatch that because I legitimately completely forgot what happens, and I just couldn't help but notice how robotic and fake sounding the dialogue is. Everything just sounds like it's generated. Like it's horrible. So basically the plot is Henry has to take a special visitor to certain stops. However, at each stop, he gets made fun of by Harry and Bert for using special coal. At the first stop, Henry decides to use regular coal as they follow him for some reason. The character at the 3 stops point out how Henry looks rough, and Harry and Bert make fun of Henry again. Rinse and repeat until you get to the 3rd strike. I'm just gonna stop midway there because we all know what happens at the end stuff, but just they turn Henry into such a little bitch in this era, like seriously. Like, the classic era Henry and regular series Henry will probably not take any of this shit from anyone else, especially these 2 idiots. And also, this episode is just horrible, like 99% of this whole era. And it's the era like I initially grew up on, like the first half of it at least. Early CGI Thomas is just engraved into my brain for like the imagery, marketing, and merchandise. And just so sad revisiting something from my childhood, just to end up having it be so horrible. Number 5 worst. Ho Ho Snowman. Again, it's the same Mad Lib script, except it does more character assassination with Henry. Henry says he is scared of the snow for some reason, and Charlie tries to cheer him up, but fails 3 times. One of which involves Charlie pretending to be a snowman, and Henry fully believes that the snowman is real and talking to him. So much so that Henry ends up cowering in the sheds. Are you fuck? Of course, at the end, Charlie apologizes, and Henry suddenly likes the snow now out of nowhere. The only positive I can really give here, that the character choices are pretty decent at least. It's Charlie, Henry, and Thomas in this one. Still a garbage episode. Such a shame, because this one actually had hope. But that hope was stomped out with spiky cleats. Number 4 worst. Wonky Whistle. We all know why this one sucks. I've seen a few people put it number 1 as well. So I'll try to keep this pretty brief. It's the same formula as the entire era, but Thomas's whistle is stupidly annoying, and just I can't really put into words on why it's bad. You should just go watch it itself. I believe one of the Thomas channels officially has the episode up somewhere, I think. I hate this episode. But, like before, this is somehow tamer than what follows. Like, this is just insane. Moving on. Number 3 worst. Push me, pull you. I don't know a single person that can even tolerate this episode, let alone even like it or even give any positives to it, really. So in this episode, Scarlet takes some fuck-ass puppet show train for some reason, because the train needs that apparently. He sets off and eventually meets Rheneas, who offers to help. Scarlet basically tells him to fuck off, and then they play tug-of-war to see who's strong enough to pull it. It's puppets! Literally the lightest piece of shit to exist. A coupling snaps, and Scarlet runs away with part of the train because his brakes won't work apparently. Scarlet crashes into Duncan, stopping him from running away, but then Scarlet decides to keep going anyway because he is late. Oh my god. He then crashes into Rusty, who stops midway through the crossing and he gets hit. And the collision also stops Scarlet again. But he keeps going though for some reason, even though he's already used his brakes twice now in those. Eventually he runs into a pond because plot. He literally used his brakes twice already. Why didn't you use them here? I mean, my complaints with the episode are very similar to Unlucky Tug Season 12 retrospective. I mean, it literally killed Trampy from how bad it is, so... yeah, this is easily the worst episode of the whole Mata era, in my personal opinion. The CGI faces don't help either. I noticed this was like freshly new at the time, but like it just looks horrendous. They all look so stoned out of their minds. Their pupils are insanely huge. And also their faces don't even match their model faces at all. Everything in this episode is complete and utter dog shit. Moving on to the bottom worst episodes. Number 2 worst. Panicky Percy. If you thought Henry's character assassination in CGI was bad, oh boy, you are not ready for what they did to my boy Percy. Percy became a complete baby hypochondriac in CGI. They did work with it in the Brenner era to an extent, but then Bubba came in and just undid all the progress and cranked it up to 10,000 with the character assassination. Percy almost falls into the turntable during winter and is now paranoid about the dangers of snow since it froze the turntable. He then starts imagining snares that are completely impossible to happen. He thinks he's going to collide with Diesel, even though they are on different tracks. Percy heads to Knapford and he doesn't see Thomas there, and then he starts panicking. He thinks that because Thomas never returned from his job at Arsborough, they got caught in some fucking avalanche, even though everything is normal right now. Percy then recruits a bunch of characters to search the whole island for Thomas. Okay, first of all, why are you searching the entire mainland and island when you knew where he last was? Just go to Arlesborough. Yeah, he was at Brenham for the whole time, but Percy didn't know that. So why do you still need a search party if he didn't know he was... It's just stupid. Percy is getting even more worried now because he can't find Thomas. So much so that he speeds so fast that he flies off the tracks at a curve, like a car. Like, how is his tiny saddle tank having ass going so fast to fly off the tracks at Mach fuckhole? Like, oh my god. Okay, anyway, so the whole Steam team suddenly spawns next to him moments later, even though they're on all different parts of the island. Thomas is there, and he says he was diverted to a different job in Brendam. Percy's calm now, only to start fully panicking again once he notices that James is gone. Like, full-on screaming and everything. Like, it's just... oh my god. Percy then sees James pull up seconds later. This one's just horrible, because... the way this episode handled a concept like anxiety and panic attacks is just ridiculous. Like, it just makes it seem like Percy was just flat out like delusional and was at dementia or something. And when the others realized that Percy was actually panicking, they just laugh and shit. Like, that's just horrible. I absolutely hate this episode. It's just garbage. Before we get into my number 1 worst pick, I would like to name a few dishonorable mentions. We'll be going through 3 in this case. The first one I would like to mention is Edward Strikes Out. This one is guilty of very badly mischaracterizing Edward, but I feel like this could have been savable with a simple character swap. Still a pretty mid episode nonetheless. I don't really like this one much. Dishonorable mention 2 is The Green Controller. This one is pretty stupid too, but I feel like if the opening scene was rewritten to be like a telephone situation, it would have worked a lot better. I also like Beat James' livery too. Still, mid-episode overall, I feel. My third dishonorable mention is Edward the Hero. This is another Miller era Mad Lib script, but instead of 3 mistakes, Edward does 3 good deeds along the way. Actual new ground was broken in this episode, which is pretty unheard of for this era. It's pretty insane. Now then, for the #1 worst Thomas episode. There were a lot of bad episodes to choose from. Season 23 had so many duds, and the whole Miller era did too. But most of those episodes from those eras did at least have some slight, faint, tiny idea of what Thomas should at least be on a basic, bare-bones minimum level. My pick for #1 worst is an episode that I believe gets the whole spirit and identity of Thomas and Friends completely and 100% wrong. It is the most crystal clear example of just how much Thomas and Friends as a show and intellectual property has lost its identity so fast underneath Mattel's ownership. My pick for the #1 worst episode out of all of Thomas and Friends' 24 seasons is Cleo the Road Engine. This episode embodied just how much this franchise shit the bed on all fronts at this point. Cleo is this new car thing that wants to race Thomas. Everyone says she shouldn't, but Cleo does so anyways. Even though Ruth, who is driving her, can easily stop her. All hell breaks loose and the most wacky hijinks unfold. Gordon cuts off a full-speed Gordon and starts transforming and flipping around like she's a fucking Decepticon. In the end, Cleo decides that the roads are just fine for her and will stick to them. Okay, just... what in the utter fuck were they thinking with this one? Like, this just gets everything wrong about this show. Like, seriously. The visuals suck, the pacing is batshit insane, and the characterization of the few actual Thomas characters in this. Everything is just completely wrong. Also, Cleo's design. What the hell is this? I think she's meant to be like a steam car or something, but isn't really. She can also extend up and flip around and stuff. Her wheels also have like train wheel counterweights on her road wheels. Why does she have this? This is probably just the worst character design out of this whole franchise, like seriously. Her face is also just... ugh. Thomas and Friends' true spirit is just non-existent in Cleo the Road Engine. This is probably the one episode that gets everything wrong at its absolute most. It is easily, in my personal opinion, the #1 worst episode across Thomas and Friends' 24 seasons. Just disaster on all fronts. Oh, that was very blood-boiling at the end there. Those are what I consider the 10 worst Thomas episodes. But don't go yet, we still have to cover the top 10 best Thomas episodes. It is going to get a lot more positive from here. So let's dive in. Number 10 best. Duncan Gets Spooked. I consider this to be the Thomas counterpart of the episode Ghosts from Tugs. It's dark and eerie and epic. The whole vibe of this episode is on a whole nother level compared to any other episode. Peter Sam's train runs away and falls off a bridge. Duncan says they'll come back to spook him. Rusty, overhearing, is clapped back by telling the story of the engine who fell off the same bridge and drowned. Duncan doesn't believe the story of the ghost is real, and says as much all day long while working. By the evening, he's now eager to leave, but his crew take their sweet time in doing so. That is why you get back at him. Duncan now grows more nervous as they cross the old iron bridge, all going to the crew's plan. They stop midway in the middle of the night, and then see the outline of the lost engine made by fireflies. Duncan's driver throws a rock into the ravine. Duncan, thinking this is actually the spirit of the lost engine, panics and floors it back to the sheds. While cowering in the shed, Duncan, still paranoid, looks for his crew to make sure they're still there. I love this episode. Duncan never finds out about his driver throwing the rock or anything, and fully believes that the ghost was real. A masterpiece of an episode. Number 9 best. Toby and the Stout Gentleman. This is the first episode that features some of my favorite characters ever. You're probably wondering, how is this above Duncan Gets Spooked? And it is because I believe it's the only episode to fully take place entirely outside of Sodor's main railways. Toby's line is struggling to stay open due to buses and lorries taking everything over. And one fateful day, Tom Hat and his family pop a visit, and ride around Toby's train every day for 2 weeks, and absolutely love it. The scene leading up to them taking the rides in the train is so funny, because Toby just sits there and just takes it all the insults from Steven and Bridget as they banter. I also love how after the Hat family leaves, there is like little to no music and little montage to leading up that the line is set to close. You can really feel the sadness and dread in the air. Of course, we all know the next day that Toby is saved by Topham and then harasses a cop in the very next episode. Everything in this episode is so cozy, and I love it. Number 8 best. Rusty and the Boulder. This one is literally man versus nature, Indiana Jones style. Rusty and, by extension, Thumper are mining out areas nearby the area of the Boulder Perch. Rusty grows worrisome about it over time, and eventually Thumper knocks it loose while mining. All hell breaks loose, and a boulder nearly kills Rusty, Scarlotti, Rheneas, and Percy. The boulder ramps to the sheds, and they blow up on impact. When the dust finally settles, Topham closes the mine, saying, "We should have left this part of the island alone," before it fades back to Polder, who has since been moved to a new perch. A face is briefly shown before the episode ends, and that's why I love it. And also the action is absolutely amazing too, I love it. An instant classic episode. 7 best. Thomas, Terrence, and the Snow. This one is probably the simplest of the whole list. Thomas meets Terrence the tractor, and then calls him ugly. It eventually bites him in the ass when he runs to a snowdrift without a snowplow months later, and Terrence comes to rescue him. Thomas apologizes for calling him ugly, and the two of them become friends. It's a tried and true phenomenon that's been done many times in this series. But what makes this episode stand out to me, personally, is the visuals. The snowy countryside and admittedly fake kind of looking scenery is why I love this episode. Christmas media should look fake and have a practical feel to it. The practical sets feel is what adds the charm to Christmas and wintry media. The amount of passion and soul put into this episode's visuals is why I love it. The music too is also really good, I have to point that out as well. It feels like a classic Christmas movie watching this, and I love it. Number 6 best. Not So Slow Coaches. This is easily my favorite episode of the whole CGI series. Thomas is pulling Andy and Clarabelle along his branch line as per usual, and they also banter. Again, as per usual. Thomas leaves them in the yard while he goes off to a different job, and while Andy and Clarabelle are sleeping, they're accidentally shunted with Caitlin's coaches. Thanks a lot, Charlie. And then Caitlin takes off with them right when Thomas returns to get them. It becomes a high-speed chase across the island to save Andy and Clarabelle. Thomas quite literally travels across the entire surface area of Sodor, non-stop chasing Caitlin. Thomas fails to catch up to Caitlin before she heads off across the bridge to the mainland. Thomas sits there defeated, thinking he had lost these two favorite people in the whole world forever. And then Hero comes across with them anyways, and they're reunited. There is so much heart in this episode, I love it. Thomas' realization is that he was being a bit harsh on his coaches during the chasing is why I love it so much. He doesn't realize it after the whole chase or anything, he realizes it during the whole chase, because he can see what he's thinking during those moments. I just love this episode, it's just the heartstrings being tugged here. So good. I love this episode. Number 5 best. Escape. It would be a crime not to include this in the top 5. Escape is an amazing episode. While taking a late night train to the mainland, Douglas finds an escaping engine named Oliver while taking a train over. Oliver is trying to escape scrap on the mainland and is trying to make it to Sodor. Douglas, who had escaped scrap to Sodor with Donald, sees himself in Oliver's shoes, and he helps him out. The group narrowly makes it to Sodor, and as the score goes absolutely apeshit, it is so good. And Oliver is fully restored, and he now is set to work with Duck on the Little Western branch line. What else can I really say about this episode? It is so good. Everyone has already said why, so just go watch it yourself, I guess. It's so good. Banger episode. Number 4 best. All at Sea. This one is super nostalgic to me, as it was one of my favorites from childhood, especially George Carlin's narration of it. Duck wants to travel beyond the horizon, but can't because he's stuck to his rails because he's a steam engine. He dreams about it the entire episode, but after helping in a rescue operation, he realizes his strengths of being a steam engine and accepts his identity and what he does in life. I don't really have much else to say about this that hasn't been said already. I love this episode. It's pretty simple, but very strong episode. Number 3 best. Lady Hat's birthday. This one is easily the most unique episode of the whole series, because for the majority of the runtime is focused on human characters. So Tom Hat is on his way to his wife's birthday party in his new suit. While en route, his cart fire goes flat. Fearing he'll dirty up his suit while in the middle of changing it, he instead hitchhikes on Caroline, who happened to be passing by at that moment, only for her to eventually overheat and break down. Tom then flags down George and rides with him, and while flooring it, George spins out, sending Tom flying into the mud. He climbs out alright and uninjured, but is now absolutely covered in mud and grossness. He heads over to an idling Thomas, who happened to be watching everything. Thomas's driver said that the fireman was out sick, to which Tom decides to be the fireman himself, much to Thomas's delight. Thomas and Tom book it to the station and make it just in time. Tom jumps out of Thomas's cab, buys a huge bunch of flowers, and rents it for the party. Lady Ed sees how dirty her husband is, and understands how much trouble he went through to get there for her. Everyone laughs with each other as the party goes on. I love this episode because before this, Topham was really only known as the authority figure. He would only really appear during big events and nothing much else really. But this episode really humanized him. He has a family, personality of his own, and his own life goals. Easily one of my all-time favorites. Number 2 best. Thomas and Birdie's Great Race. I love this one because it is so much fun. Thomas officially meets Birdie for the first time, and the two stop bantering. They eventually decide to race each other to prove which one of them is faster. They head off with their passengers, and this is where the fun begins. You can see each character fly ahead and fall behind in the race time and time again, the score popping off as everything unfolds. It is such a fun time in this episode. Thomas almost loses at one point, but then manages to get ahead and cut off Birdie before winning. Birdie congratulates Thomas on the win, and the two are officially becoming friends in this one. This one is a pretty simple premise, but the execution is what does it for me. It is so much fun. I love this episode. Easily the most fun episode of the whole series in my opinion. I love it. Before I reveal my number 1 pick, let's go over some quick honorable mentions. There will also be 3 in this section too. My first honorable mention is Thomas Gets Tricked, or otherwise known as Thomas and Gordon. I love this one because it's simply just a non-stop joyride. Once Gordon leaves with the express with Thomas Culled behind him, it's a non-stop joyride. I love this one. My second honorable mention is Away from the Sea. I mean, come on, I gotta include Porter's debut episode in this list somewhere. I like this one because of Porter's proactivity in the climax. The way he stops the runaway salty is pretty cool. It took me a bit off guard when I first watched it. I was like, huh, valid. I also like how the diesel engine is threatened by the presence of a steam engine this time, instead of the inverse. Pretty cool way to flip the script. Love this one too. My final honorable mention is Halloween from Season 8. I'm a sucker for good Halloween specials and stuff. The visuals and character dynamics in this one are very good. Love this one. My number 1 pick is an episode that I don't think I've ever seen anyone put as their number 1 pick. I've thought about this for a very long time, and I've gone through a lot of other possibilities, but I believe the one I'm picking is an episode that is in fact the best for a lot of reasons. It is certainly the best of the season it aired with for sure. My pick for the number 1 best Thomas episode is Scare the Engines. This episode, in my opinion, embodies everything great about Thomas and Friends. Now just hear me out for a second, don't crucify me yet. So this episode follows Thomas, Percy, and Duck, some of our 3 big characters. It's around the time of Halloween, and the 3 engines are assigned to some scrap jobs, right after Edward tells them about ghost stories relating to the scrapyard. All 3 want to finish in time to see the fireworks. Thomas teases Percy about the ghost engine while they work, and Duck cooks up a plan to get back at Thomas with Percy. At the end, one engine is needed to stay behind and finish up, and Duck has Thomas stay behind. Thomas arrogantly agrees, saying he's not afraid of anything, while Percy and Duck leave. And Thomas is left alone in the smelter's yard. Eventually, he starts to see things around him. These scrap pieces start to look like ghosts, the chains look like ghost fingers, etc. After backing up for some time, Thomas stops suddenly and wheezes. The steam from the wheezing sets off an old whistle nearby, and Thomas thinks it's the ghost engine, and then he runs off panicking, just flooring it out of the smelter's yard. It's pretty funny. Thomas flies past Duck and Percy right as they were talking about him. Duck laughs as they arrive at the fireworks show and watch the fireworks. Percy starts to grow worrisome, however, and then decides to go look for Thomas, and finds him hiding in the shed. The two friends talk and make up, and they decide to watch the fireworks at the sheds together. I love this episode because it has a bit of everything when it comes to Thomas's strong suits. We got a good character banter, we got some good real-life elements, we got some good night visuals, some like ghostly Halloween elements. We also got good music and good character moments, and also heart. Everything in this episode just feels right. I'm also a sucker for Halloween stuff, so that's a bonus with this. In my opinion, this is easily the best episode of Thomas and Friends. Whew! That was quite the list to get through. Yeah, this might be one of my longest videos ever. I really hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did making it. So much fun. Next week's video will be the Halloween special, and the Halloween marathon will go up on Halloween itself. And in November, Rails of the Porterverse will make its grand return. So stay tuned for that. And also feel free to share your top 10 best and worst rankings of Thomas episodes in the comments. I would love to see what y'all think. Thank you all very much for watching this episode, and I shall see you all same time next week.